Welcome to Caregiving Club On Air. This podcast is dedicated to the millions of family caregivers who want wellness tips and self-care solutions, who seek expert advice, and who want news about healthy aging and how to create well home design in our forever homes. I'm Sherri Snelling, a corporate gerontologist, author, and educator, a TV interviewer, host, and news commentator. I'm joining you from Southern California, where our interviews and news take us all across the country to explore the many ways to help you on your caregiving journey and to lift you up here at Caregiving Club On Air. So welcome everybody to season 6 of our Caregiving Club On Air podcast. I cannot believe it's been 6 seasons. And I just want to do a big shout out to all of our listeners because it's because of you that we are still here and still bringing you really great interviews with experts and other information that's so, integral and inspirational and informational when it comes to caregiving. So thank you for that. This episode is in January where we're going to focus on Financial Wellness Month. And, when it comes to caregiving, we know that the costs of care, planning for long-term care, what to know, where can we save money, how do we help out loved ones, whether it's grandparents or in-laws or parents who may not have the savings to cover some long-term care. These are all of the challenges that families and family caregivers face. So we're going to tackle those with 2 really great experts, both from Raymond James Financial Services. The first interview is going to be with Emily Treasure, who is the senior manager of the longevity planning program. And she's going to tell us what that means and why financial advisors are really becoming now your go-to source for not just your investments and your wealth planning and, how to plan ahead for retirement, but really about this whole lifespan planning that we talk about in longevity, which includes, of course, caregiving and care costs and long-term care. So Emily's going to share a lot with us on that. And then her colleague, Margaret Starner, who has become a dear friend for me over the last years, is such an inspiration. She is in her 80s and still actively out there as a financial advisor running the Starner Group, which is part of Raymond James Financial Advisors. And she's going to tell us more about what it means to be 80 and still very vibrant and energetic and planning ahead. And certainly, things that you think about when you start to get into kind of that last third, if you will, of life. And what she advises her clients to think about when it comes to longevity planning. So that's just going to be a really great interview. Always inspirational to talk to Margaret. She's such a kick. So I think you'll enjoy both of those interviews. And then I want to let you in on, we're going to change things up this season. And I'd love your feedback. So you can always go ahead and email us at podcast@caregivingclub.com. But, in the past, of course, we've brought you also news. So we interject in between our expert interviews, things like caregiver wellness news, well home design news, or what's happening in the workplace when it comes to employees and caregiving and how employers are supporting their caregiving employees and all of those types of trends and research studies and things that are out there. And it usually makes the podcast a little long. And sometimes it takes a little longer to get to our second interviews, which we often have 2 great interviews on each episode, which we are trying to do 2 episodes at least a month now, maybe more. So what we decided is we're going to break it up a little bit. We want to focus on those experts. We want to get you to them and what they're able to share with you quicker. And so instead of having all the news in between, we're going to take that out. But we know a lot of you love a lot of that information. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to put that into a bi-weekly newscast that we are going to launch on our YouTube channel. So it won't be a podcast, but it will be still available via YouTube, so for free. And you can go, and all you need to do is subscribe to us on YouTube. And we're going to have the new playlist up there. So it'll be Caregiving Club News or something like that. But we're going to bring this out every couple of weeks because there's so much happening in this space. And what that is going to be dedicated to is the news that we always bring you, but also the really great resources. So whatever is pertinent for that month, whether it's the news that's driving it, or something like Financial Wellness Month, we'll have resources like the Cost of Care Survey, the National Council on Aging Benefits Checkup, and we'll have links and all of that in the episode guide page, as well as the show notes that we have on YouTube. So love to hear what you think about that. I think it gives you still what you're looking for, but it doesn't make the podcast as long that you need to listen to. And now you know that you can go to the podcast just for all of our really great expert interviews that we're going to continue to do. And hopefully we can get more of those then done, so we can bring you more podcasts more frequently, which is kind of our goal for this year. So love to hear what you think about that. And again, my producer says, remind people to subscribe to both the audio podcast, which you can find on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and all your other listening channels, iHeartRadio, et cetera, Pandora, Sirius XM, but also subscribe now to our YouTube channel, because that's going to bring you the news. But also you can access all of our 7-minute self-care solution videos that we've been doing every week, that's based on the Me Time Monday program, and other really interesting things, and some free webinars and stuff that we offer on that YouTube channel. So thank you again for being a listener and a subscriber. So the other thing that we want to share with you is that there is so much going on in this space. And so if you have any really great resources, tips, I just did a really wonderful event with some employees of a large corporation, and I presented information about caregiving to the employees, but then we did a moderated panel. And I have to tell you, listening to the actual employees who are sandwich generation and having them share what really helped them. And everybody was different. Everybody kind of had different needs. Again, despite the fact they had children they're caring for, as well as now older parents, but they all had different things they turn to, different resources that help them out. And I think those are the things that we want to bring to you, because we know caregiving is not a one-size-fits-all situation. So we want to bring you as much information as possible, because it's not that everything is going to be helpful, but there will be certainly some nuggets and things that hopefully we can, make you aware of, that is going to help make that caregiving journey a little bit smoother. So with that, I just want to say thank you again to all of our listeners. We love you. Again, subscribe to our channel. And here we go with our interview, our first interview for this episode, which is with Emily Treasure, the Senior Manager of Longevity Planning at Raymond James. Well, I'm really thrilled to have one of our guests for this special January episode, where we're focusing on Financial Wellness Month, because she has become a colleague and a friend over the last year or so. But she runs a really interesting program at Raymond James, which really, I think, puts them ahead as a thought leader in how to look at what's happening, within our families, and with multi-generational financial planning that needs to be done these days. So I want to welcome to our podcast, Emily Treasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Sherri. I'm really excited to be here and, highlight a little bit more about what longevity planning is and what it is at Raymond James, and, how we can help all of our caregivers and, those out there really focused on their, financial wellness.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, one of the things that I think is so interesting about what you guys have done, and you've done it now for years. This is not a new program, I should mention, but you're the senior manager in charge of the longevity planning, and it has been a focus of Raymond James for a long time. But before we get into all those details, we always love to ask our guests. First question is, where are we talking to you from today?
Yeah, I am in sunny St. Petersburg, Florida, and the weather is beautiful right now this time of year. I've had a cold front move through, so I've been in Florida my entire life. I grew up in Florida, went to college at the University of Florida, and now I've been in the Tampa, St. Petersburg, Florida area for, a little over 7 years now since I started at Raymond James.
I love it. And we're having similar weather out here in Southern California. I think we kind of sometimes match or mirror each other. And I was in lovely Orlando with you last November for the women's conference that Raymond James puts on every year, which was really fabulous. But so let's dig into this really special program that you guys, as I said, you've been a thought leader in this space, really thinking ahead of what your clients, when you're talking about financial planning, what are the clients really challenged with? And I think even more beyond that is, what do they not know? And very often, as you and I have discussed, when it comes to caregiving and long-term care costs and how to plan for that, it's not even something we normally think about. So this is an area where you're really starting to be more proactive with your clients. But tell us a little bit about this whole longevity planning program that you have at Raymond James.
Yeah, so, at Raymond James, we really believe that financial wellness extends beyond investments. It's not just about growing assets anymore. It's really about preparing for these realities of longer lifespans and, living longer. Oftentimes that happens in retirement. So this type of planning or longevity planning is really the future of financial advice, in my opinion, and something that we see becoming a client expectation. It's no longer a specialty service. So our longevity planning program really equips advisors with these tools and resources that help our clients navigate critical life stages. So everything from, healthcare and the cost of healthcare, caregiving, to fraud prevention and legacy planning. And it really started at Raymond James. Like you said, it's not a new program. It started over 10 years ago when we were introduced to this MIT Age Lab. And there are 3 questions that can help us predict the future quality of life. So who will change my light bulbs? How will I get an ice cream cone? And who will I have lunch with? And it sounds really simple, but who will change my light bulbs? That first question is asking, how will I maintain my home and how will I maintain it safely? Then how will I get an ice cream cone? How do I get what I want when I want it? To simplify that is the ice cream cone. And then who will I have lunch with? It's not about the meal at all. It's about community and who we spend our time with. So these 3 questions have really shaped what longevity planning at Raymond James is today. And we've taken this framework and we've scaled it to provide these national resources that help Raymond James clients navigate every possible life transition. And we believe that these questions help us address these topics proactively so that our clients can feel confident that their financial plan doesn't just support their wealth and their retirement financially. It really takes into account their quality of life, their family, and their dynamics, increasing their health span and well span, just as their lifespan continues to increase.
And I love those 3 questions. Those come, of course, from our mutual friend, Joe Coughlin, who runs the
Yeah.
MIT Age Lab. And, because they are so simple, but they are part of what we don't often think about, right? Until maybe we are getting older. And I think for both the older clients that you have who want to think about, okay, how may this impact, my younger family members, and also those younger family members who are looking at, hey, I know that, mom and dad and grandparents are living longer. How is this maybe going to affect me and my financial picture? So one of the things that you've done, and I think this is just so brilliant, and I hope it becomes a trend. I mean, I love that you guys are out there ahead of everybody else, but I do hope it becomes a trend because one of the things I've seen in caregiving is we often say, well, there's a lot of resources out there, but how do you know what's out there? You don't even sometimes know the questions to ask. We don't think about this stuff. So what you've done is you've brought in these partners from the outside to kind of create this ecosystem, if you will, around your clients so that, again, it's not necessarily a service that you're providing, but you're saying, hey, let us help you with this. And then you identify that partner. So tell us a little bit more about that program.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we'll probably touch on this as well. There's this concept of being a center point advisor. And, my dad said this to me years ago that I want to go to my financial advisor for everything, not just money, but I want to go to him for tax advice and legal advice and, Medicare. Maybe it's not him providing me those tools, but he knows where to point me to. And I think that's really what these longevity planning resources do is it allows you to go to your financial advisor for all things, you and your family. So we have this thoughtful suite of national partnerships that we've developed based on that MIT Age Lab framework that's designed to help families plan ahead. So navigate care and healthcare, and these resources are available through their financial advisor. And it's really built around what we call our longevity planning ribbon. So these 5 buckets of plan, protect, care, thrive, and share. And together, these tools help ensure that families are supported financially, but also emotionally and practically. So I'll highlight a couple of the resources, maybe more specific to caregiving, but today we have a suite of 8 tools. I'll start with planning because that really sets the foundation. And I say a lot, and I know we've all heard the famous adage that failing to plan is planning to fail. And I think that's really true with caregiving. It just, especially as care and evolves and we age, it's really important to plan proactively. And that's where we've partnered with an organization called AROG to provide access to legal guidance and estate planning tools. So both do-it-yourself or DIY document creation, but then also access to a support network of attorneys. So for caregivers, this is really, really important when it comes to having things like your powers of attorney, your healthcare directives in place, but also understanding your loved one's wishes before you have to make any sort of decisions under pressure. And then to take that a step further, and to move kind of into that care bucket, we work with a resource called Broadspire that can help families navigate some of the most complex but also costly parts of aging, and that's healthcare and housing. So they have care experts that can come into Raymond James clients' homes and provide strategies and recommendations for aging in place, maintaining the home. How will I change my light bulbs? So assist with home modifications, but then they can go as far as finding and evaluating and recommending a memory care facility or a care facility locally. We actually find that a lot of our clients use this for long distance caregiving needs. So I'm in the state of Florida. Maybe I have a loved one retiring, out in California. I don't know what the care market looks like out there, state and local requirements, good and bad care, finding it's really important. Broadspire care managers are local, they're experts, and they can help us navigate all aspects of our own or a loved one's care.
But I think, that I just want to pause for a moment because I feel like that is starting to bubble to the top of the number one thing that caregivers are looking for because I do a lot of work with employers and this whole care navigation piece. It's like, okay, guide me to what I should think about, what questions I should have, but also like what resources, right? As you said, we may not know, well, what's the best assisted living in that town or in that community. And so having those experts that can help you is really, I mean, that is a value in itself, right? So the fact that you kind of make those connections for your clients, I think is so critical. Anyway, I just want to make that comment, but keep going on your partners.
With Broadspire as well, we don't know what to ask either. We don't know when maybe we find, by some miracle, we find a care facility. What do we ask them to ensure that they are the right, partner and home for a loved one? Same thing with the home that or care that comes into our home, contractors that come and make modifications to the home. How do you know that all of these different places and people are qualified? Broadspire takes all of that logistical guesswork and they have a financial advocacy piece too, that they take all of the craziness and confusingness out of it and they say, we'll handle it for you. And I just think it's so awesome that Raymond James advisors can be the one to make that connection for their clients.
Absolutely. Any other services that you want to highlight? I know that we've had on our podcast in the past Liz Lowy
Yeah.
from EverSafe, which deals a lot with more of that elder abuse, financial fraud, identity theft, grandparent scams, all the things that are out there that we know can make our older adults, more vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. Liz is wonderful. We work really closely with Liz and her partner Howard. EverSafe is one of the tools that we've partnered with to where advisors can provide that referral for their client to receive fraud and identity theft protection with that focus on financial caregiving. One of our newer partnerships is actually an organization called Caregivers. So I've long asked the question, I think a lot of us have, is who cares for our caregivers? I've seen this firsthand with, my parents caring for their parents. I'm currently watching my mother-in-law care for her mom. Still fully capable Nana, but my mother-in-law built an extension to her home. It's a granny pod. We call it a granny pad. But she did everything from the permitting process in the county to what are the tax benefits? How does this change property value? Does it? All the way to those difficult conversations about downsizing or resizing and how does life look now that we're making this change. So I just remember I kept asking myself, who helps my mother-in-law aside from us just all going in blind together? Who's actually supporting her, not just practically but emotionally? And that's where CareLoop really comes in. They can support caregivers who are juggling work and family, and everything in between. So they have tools from peer-to-peer channel kind of thought sharing, expert resources, articles to organizational tools, medication, appointments, providers. And then maybe most importantly, clients can gain access to a dedicated care coach through CareLoop. So a lot of this is at no cost to clients, but then they can choose for an optional kind of upgrade to work with a care coach for all things personalized, care plan, if you will. And caregiving can happen at any stage, any income level. As someone who is using CareLoop myself to care for a loved one, I know I don't have to tell you how important these resources are, but the way that, an advisor can make this simple introduction to CareLoop, and a client can feel like they are supported and supporting their loved ones, I think is so impactful. um,
Yeah.
and something I
It,
think I'm proud of.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but CareLoop is one of the names that we know that does help employers. I know there's other services out there like Care.com and some others, but they are one that does a really great job, I think. And again, it's that we just don't know the questions to ask, and so as they're talking to you, they can say, "Well, have you thought about this?" Or "Do you want to plan ahead for this kind of thing?" Which is opens your eyes to all the things that maybe you'll be encountering, maybe not today, but certainly possibly in the future. I was so honored to be asked to speak at your women's conference that you guys had last fall, which was a really terrific event. I think you had what, over 800
I think so.
financial advisors that were women, which was so empowering to hear all these women who are out there leading the charge and helping their clients, to stay financially resilient. But you had a session that I sat in on, which was really fascinating. And you had people who talked about advisors who said, yeah, I'm actually a multi-generational advisor. Like I have 3 generations in one family I'm advising. Talk to us a little bit about what are the trends that you see in terms of how things are maybe changing for financial advisors when it comes to this more family planning and getting more involved in people's life plans, not just, as you said, investment plans.
Yeah, I think, I think we've seen more and more individuals ask for this type of planning. We're seeing a lot of sandwich generation clients come forward, and I think it's pivoted to be where if you can position yourselves as a person of trust to your clients' children, you are you are going to maintain those assets. We see so often that this transition of wealth, from one transit or one generation to another, financial advisors really often think I'm going to maintain those assets. They're going to stay within my practice, but those adult children may not know the advisor as well as they think they do, and then they leave. For a lack of better term, they fire the advisor and they take those assets elsewhere. But I think what these resources do, and the way that advisors can position themselves by talking about things beyond the portfolio, is what really instills the trust of the next generation and allows you to capture those assets that they can step back and say, I'm watching my parents' financial advisor take care of mom and dad, not just financially, but I'm watching them talk about care, want to understand family dynamics, want to get to know, the next generation, my children. That's what's going to make these individuals stay with these financial advisors. And those advisors that have these connections, I think they have most certainly gone above and beyond and moved past the portfolio to have these deeper, more holistic planning conversations that allows them to connect with future generations.
Yeah, I think that's such a great, the continuity, if you will, of having that, like you said, that trust, which is the number one thing, that we certainly need, particularly with a financial advisor. But, to know that they have that background story. And also to know that, they're going to lead us in the direction of what makes sense now. Like maybe this made sense for your parents or grandparents, but,
Right.
we need to look at this or, we need to kind of shift. I think that's really nice because otherwise, you start with a new advisor maybe, and they don't have all of that backstory or what's happened or the family dynamic, which often comes into play, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that those relationships are so critical. One of the things that we focus on in January, of course, being Financial Wellness Month, is when it comes to caregiving, so many of us have this sticker shock when we see the cost of care. I think there was a survey that came out a few years ago that said up to 50% of Americans believe that Medicare will cover long-term care costs like an assisted living monthly fee or memory care, whatever, and it does not. And so, what are the things that you find with your clients when it does come to those long-term care costs and that caregiving costs? Do you talk about it early so that people have enough time to start to pivot and plan ahead?
Yeah, so sticker shock, rightfully so. I think the increasing cost of care, and the burden that puts on families. I don't blame anyone for the sticker shock because it is one of the most expensive, significant expenses in retirement. And many people are surprised that they don't have prior coverage for care or custodial care. So I think the way that we approach it is we want our advisors, and what they do is they help clients just understand potential costs and the options available. So at Raymond James, we have a dedicated long-term care team that can help guide our advisors and ultimately their clients through long-term care insurance planning. And there's even tools out there that can help you calculate the cost of care near you, so you have a decent financial picture, right? And then our advisors, they provide comprehensive goal planning. So they enable these thoughtful conversations around wealth and health and family dynamics. We have a software, goal planning and monitoring, or GPM for short, that allows our clients to see their full financial picture so they can incorporate things like their wants, needs, and wishes, their expectations and concerns, which often includes the cost of care. To kind of simplify that, what we see a lot of advisors doing is, we ask our clients, what are your needs? Oftentimes they say, cost of healthcare, basic expenses in retirement, maybe, periodic car servicing. What do we want? We want to remodel the kitchen and the bathroom, or we want a new car. What do we wish for? Maybe that's a vacation home in the mountains when, my husband and I retire. That can also be combined with expectations and concerns. So I expect to live an active lifestyle, to travel, to spend time with family and friends, but maybe I'm concerned about outliving my money, maybe developing dementia or Alzheimer's, or the cost of my own healthcare, my family's healthcare. This planning software really triggers how their plan can help. So they can include new goals, they can stress test their money, they can see what that looks like when they have long-term care expenses. They can even say, let's stress test it if I outlive 100. So our advisors have this ability to give clients this full financial picture and almost give them peace of mind that, any of this could happen. We can't change that. You're going to have life transitions and probably moments of crisis, but we can help, and we're going to plan for those things. And it's really important that we plan for that yesterday, is what I say. Aging's in the details, and planning early and often is so important. So having these communications, not just with your financial advisor, but with your family, are so important that I think Raymond James and our advisors do a really great job of looking at it holistically as, beyond the portfolio, what else is going to impact our financial picture? And that's most certainly the cost of care.
But I think one of the nice things too is that, particularly for maybe the younger generations, it's a very hard conversation sometimes to have with parents, to dig into their financials, like, well, what do you have saved? And, what's planned for the future if you haven't already had that conversation. That's a hard one to get into. And sometimes having a financial advisor who's asked you those questions makes it an easy pathway to say to mom or dad, I sat down with my advisor and they were asking me about this, and I've realized I don't know anything. And that's kind of a nicer segue into just, try to dig into their information. I also think too that, like, my generation, our families and parents were like, oh honey, don't worry about it, it's all taken care of. They didn't want to have the conversation like, when I die, here's the name of the person you need to call, or whatever. But I do think that families are a little bit more open now, because we are seeing the impact of living longer and what the needs are, and all of those things. What are some of maybe either the other trends or other ways that advisors can help? Because, one of the things I keep hearing about in every aspect of every industry is how AI is changing our jobs, and maybe even going to take over some of our jobs. But I think when it comes to things like these relationships, right? And having these close conversations where you really trust another human being, that can't be overtaken by technology.
Yeah, this is the empathy. We call it, there's this in finance, there's return on investment, or ROI. There's return on empathy too. And this is that empathy. This is the piece that AI and technology and machine learning will never replicate, is the level of care and the trust that you put into your clients and you get in return. These conversations that are more than just, plugging and playing in the AI software to have these conversations around asset growth. It's so far beyond that, and it can't be replicated. And financial advisors that really practice these conversations and make it a pillar of their practice are, certain to not ever be overcome by AI, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And I think, again, I think that we do want that human connection. We want somebody who has that empathy, as you said. That's going to be hard to get from, technology and a machine and all of that. Going back to kind of the long-term care, I know there's a lot of changes happening in long-term care insurance, and we're looking to talk to someone on this podcast who actually helps families and helps caregivers navigate through that, because so many changes are happening now. You can get you can get life insurance plans, and then there's like a rider or a waiver that also has long-term care insurance. Anyway, it's just very complicated. And again, I think very hard to navigate. And if you don't know to ask, that's again where an advisor is bringing that to you, rather than you saying, hey, what about this? Because you just may not know about it.
Exactly. And I think, that's what we're seeing is for years we saw more and more people approach their financial advisor with questions on long-term care and the cost and caregiving for mom and what do I do? And there's volume there. I think right now the statistic is about a third of caregivers are sandwich generation. You add dementia there and you get a quarter of caregivers are caring for a loved one with dementia. So that's a financial and emotional burden that we've seen more and more people turn to their financial advisor and ask, what do I do? And I think today, so many financial advisors, especially at Raymond James, have been asked that question, that they're now incorporating these conversations around healthcare, estate planning, legacy planning, all of these complexities that come with longer retirements as a central pillar of their practice. They're going from retroactive answering to proactive offering. Like you said, clients don't know necessarily what to ask, but we're finding advisors are now approaching clients and saying, this is a pillar of what I talk to you about. It's no longer just your money and your investment account. It's now planning financially and holistically for life transitions. And I think that really is helping clients to preserve their autonomy and financial decision making as they age across these really long and unpredictable lives. Something I said recently was that our financial advisors are really moving beyond the question of how do I grow and allocate assets to now answering the question, who helps me when life disrupts my ability to manage them? And I think that's what makes a good financial advisor, or a good financial advisor, a good financial advisor, is the ability to proactively approach clients with, I know your needs go far beyond, the asset allocation in the portfolio. What resources can we talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. And not to panic any of our younger listeners out there, but there was a recent USA Today article talking about long-term care insurance, and the reporter was 28 years old, and there's a calculator that she went on to determine, okay, when might I have to tap into long-term care insurance and how much would I need to cover my cost of care? And it came back that she probably wouldn't need, much help until her mid 80s, but she would need about $10 million to cover those costs of care. So I think I even read that, and I've been in this space for a long time, and I went, "Oh my god, this is going to scare everybody off." But I do, and that's of course with inflation, or all the things that we know will escalate, and hopefully salaries will be commensurate with that. But it is an eye opener for younger people to say, "Hey, it's never too early to start planning for this," right?
Right, exactly. And that's a scary number. But I think as we listen to these numbers and these stories, it's so important to remember that when we think about planning for retirement, we're not just planning for basic living expenses in retirement. We are planning for everything else that happens in retirement, inevitably. And I think that's maybe why we get that $10 million figure, is because all of those other, in addition to the cost of living, all these other ancillary costs are increasing as well, that it just compounds. And it's more important than ever to plan ahead really thoughtfully.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Emily, I just really appreciate your time kind of sharing what Raymond James is doing to kind of really be ahead of the game, if you will, how important financial advisors really are. So often we think, well, do I have enough money for an advisor to really manage? I think that's not the question. It's like, do I know how to manage, this end part of life, or help my older parents or whatever, if maybe they don't have the savings, and how do we have to figure that all out? Are there any other things we didn't cover? Anything important that you want to share with our audience?
I think the only thing, I would leave everyone with is longevity planning, and this concept of, planning for longer lifespans is not just about planning to age and planning for old age. It's really planning for every life transition that happens at any stage to anybody at any level of money or income, right? So whether you're part of the sandwich generation, you're caregiving for mom from a distance, or maybe you're even aging out, close family support, the common thread between every single one of us is proactive planning and finding trusted guidance. We see that at Raymond James. We see that with research from the MIT Age Lab. So ultimately, longevity planning is just aligning your financial plans with your real life. Take a step back and align it with your health, your family dynamics, your level of independence, and ultimately your purpose and, who you want to be. And I don't think there's anything more important than that.
Yeah, so well said. I think that's absolutely so true. And I just want to also, for our listeners out there, I know that, we go worldwide with this podcast. So we have a lot of listeners all over the place. But Emily and I are going to be joining Margaret Starner, who is also on this episode, who's from Raymond James, at an event in Miami in March 12th, I think is the date we've decided on. But that'll be really fun because we're going to be talking about a lot of these topics of long-term care planning, but also just longevity. What should we be thinking about when it comes to, our own longevity and health and wellness and all of those things. So we'll have a link to that event, and that'll be fun, Emily, to do that with you.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm so excited. I feel like I could talk about this for days. So I'm excited to get to talk about it more with you and Margaret in just a couple weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's a kick. I know, love Margaret as everybody does. And she is just, I love her inspiration being in her 80s and still out there as a financial planner helping people
She's
plan
living
for.
the
She
longevity life.
is.
For
She
sure.
really is. So, just really quickly before we end, where can our listeners find out more about Raymond James and your longevity planning program?
Yeah. So if you want to learn more about what Raymond James has to offer, just visit raymondjames.com. And then if you want to learn more about longevity planning and what my team does and the resources that we offer that are available and out there, on that website, you can just search longevity planning at the upper right-hand corner of the website, and you'll find all those details.
Fantastic. Well, Emily, again, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We really enjoyed having you on and learning all of the great insights that you have when it comes to financial wellness and caregiving.
Thanks so much for having me. Let me know if you ever want to talk about it for hours and hours on end. We can do it.
Absolutely. You and I could do like weeks long on this topic.
I know. That's a good thing. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sherri.
All right. Take care. Well, I am so thrilled to have a very special guest on my podcast for this episode. She's what I would call more of a new friend. We met about a year ago through a mutual friend of ours, Amanda Stahl. And I have just been so delighted in working with her and learning from her. And you're also going to get so much really great nuggets out of life and financial planning and everything. But I want to welcome to Caregiving Club On Air, Margaret Starner of the Starner Group, which is also part of Raymond James Financial. Margaret, welcome.
Hi, how are you today?
Well, we are doing great. And again, as I said, I am so thrilled to have you on today and to talk to you. And I'm so glad we were able to set this up. First question we always ask our guests is, where are we talking to you from today?
Well, I live in a suburb of Miami, Florida, which we just won the Fiesta Bowl last night. We're the home of the University of Miami. So I'm a little drowsy from staying up and cheering.
That's very exciting. You got a lot of excitement lately because when we were setting up this interview, you were actually in the midst of celebrating your 45th anniversary of working with Raymond James. So congratulations on that. That's wonderful. As we get into the interview, I wanted people to know that I find your story so fascinating. I want you to tell us a little bit about, your background, also how you got into financial planning, the fact that you are a woman in her 80s who is still vibrant and working and thinking about things like longevity. I like to say that you went from Mississippi, where you grew up, to Miami. But tell us, Margaret, a little bit about your background and how you did get into financial planning.
Okay. Well, like you said, I grew up in the Mississippi Delta, which is the poorest part of the state. I was the oldest of 6, and my parents were Chinese immigrants. We all worked in their grocery store, which taught us a lot about business and responsibility and just business basic challenges. It's not all hunky-dory. After high school, I headed to Stanford and studied economics. My first job out of college was at a think tank, and it was during a recession, so I took what I could get, and it happened to be in long-range planning. Little did I know, I had no idea what it would shape my future thinking. I never thought of planning before. I was one of these people that procrastinated and waited till the last minute to do everything. So it's sort of funny that I ended up in long-range planning.
Yeah, I can relate to the procrastination. I usually wait until the deadline to get all my articles and everything done.
Well, that's when I get my inspiration,
Yeah, it kind of kicks you into high gear. So you've been in this field of financial planning, obviously for 45 years. You've seen a lot of changes, a
Yeah.
lot of things. But the thing that you and I really kind of bonding over is that you really have been at the forefront of thinking about longevity planning. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit first about why I got into financial planning. Like you said earlier, I was a stay-at-home mom for 15 years. And I read this article that really struck a chord with me. And I was already 40, so but I thought this is something I could do. And what inspired me was that financial planning was a way to help families build real financial security. And I love that it wasn't just about money. It was really about life goals and helping people make thoughtful choices over time. And life never is rarely goes the way you think. But what happens if you have a basic plan? It's almost like you're building a house. You change your mind about where you want the hall to be, or maybe you change your mind about where you want the light fixture, switch to be. But you have a basic plan that will help you decide, is this a good way for me to pivot or change? Because you will change. And I just thought that was so good because life rarely goes as planned.
Boy, isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what I found was the most successful people have someone like me that they trust to help keep them on track. So the philosophy of my business really works. Enjoying today while planning for tomorrow.
So, it's so interesting that, that you saw that as something where you could really help people, not just, as you say, not just with their financial planning, but with life planning. And now that we're looking at longevity bonus years, a lot of people don't really think about living beyond 65, 75, 85 and what they're going to do. And yet there's still so much life. You're the perfect model for Dr. Michael Roizen, who was the chief wellness officer at Cleveland Clinic and has written a book called The Great Age Reboot. He says 90 is the new 40. And I think you're the model for that.
Well, it's maybe. But the interesting thing is, like you said, in studying about longevity and just interviewing a lot of older people, what I found was that living a long, healthy life was a lot like building a financial plan. It's really about thinking long term and being consistent. So today we know a lot more. When I was growing up, like you said, we didn't think about getting old. Honestly, it was the furthest thing from my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But now we know how important it is that you sleep well, that you eat well, that you move well, that you don't sit all the time. And also, how do you manage? Well, we've been focusing on stress, but we never knew that it had such an impact on our whole, just having inflammation in your body as a result of a lot of stress.
Right.
And more importantly, as you age, you have a tendency to maybe not recognize that your social circle is going to start shrinking because people die, they get sick, they move. And so keeping a very diversified social network is really important. Anyway, I just think that it's a lot like planning. There's nothing really flashy about it, but like with your finances, smart habits over time will make a healthy difference.
Absolutely. So, if you could talk to your 60-year-old self, now all the things that you've learned and what you're enjoying and what you're looking forward to, what would you tell your 60-year-old self to think about in terms of longevity?
Every stage of life has its challenges. And I think for me, the biggest challenge has been staying relevant, having a purpose, and not becoming invisible.
Yeah, that's so important. And, that's also really great for people like me who are in their 60s because, traditionally people are quote unquote retiring, although I think that people aren't really retiring anymore, right? They're going into encore
Well,
careers and
there's a
doing
different word now.
different
It's
things.
like pivoting to the next stage of life.
There
The
you
word
go.
retirement, the word retirement is going out of style.
That's right. That's the old terminology. But you are thinking about like kind of what's next. Maybe you've left a traditional career after a few years, few decades, and what's new. What is it that interests you and that keeps you vibrant and keeps you socially healthy? Because as you said, and I know my mom's in her 80s and she's going through the same thing where she's losing friends, and it's really tough, because you feel like, okay, who's left, right? And so how do you keep socially active and vibrant?
Well, it's sort of funny because I think I started worrying about being irrelevant in my 60s,
Mhm.
but I didn't really focus on what that meant. I just worried about it.
Right.
And so I think that today, and because we actually didn't have a lot of information when I was 60, that was
Yeah.
25, 27 years ago.
Yeah.
And so today we have much more information about what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. And we recognize what happens, your drive becomes different. And it's time to pivot. And pivoting, it means change, and change is not easy. So I
Mhm.
will say to you that this going into the stage of what I call the super ager and anyone over 80, it is the fastest growing demographics in the developed world. And it has not been easy because you sort of don't make a difference the way you want to make a difference,
Mhm.
You're
Mhm.
not raising kids, you're not
Mhm.
running a company, your grandkids are already out of college.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
you know, and so in a way you have to really think about what is it that I can do that I can be passionate about. And I'm not sure everybody really wants to be passionate about something, but I really
Mhm.
do not want to spend my days playing mahjong and
Right.
pickleball.
Exactly. Or just planning a cruise, right? And that's
Well,
it.
one of the things that I found out in this whole journey is what was it that really motivated me all my life. And
Mhm.
part of it was I was very good at spotting trends. And when I went to Stanford the very first day when the president greets us, and he says, "You're not really here to learn to have a job. You're here to learn how to think. And if you know
Mm.
how to think, you can adjust to change." And so one of the things that impressed me about my whole financial planning career was really helping mainly women actually how to think about financially because it's not intuitive.
Yeah.
Knowing how to manage risk is not intuitive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think with aging, I sort of had to really think differently too about what is it how do I need to think? And what I came to the conclusion, and it sort of fits in with being able to afford the services of what makes aging easier, is everyone should have a physical therapist. Everyone should have a trainer, a personal trainer. Everyone should have a acupuncturist and a massage therapist. Now, those things don't come free.
Right.
I mean, there are ways of mitigating the expenses, but in general, I found over time how important it was to have not only healthy choices in life, but also making good financial decisions. And it's really just about having good habits.
Yeah. And as you said, kind of pivoting. I mean, I think back to my 30s and 40s, and I was spending, good grief, $400 or more, I hate to admit, on shoes, right? But now that becomes, like you said, the massage therapist, the physical therapy, you put it more into feeling good every day instead of just that stylish looking good,
it's sort of interesting. A lot of my clients are self-made people. They weren't born with money. And I'll never forget, I had a client who was in his 70s, and he called one day, and I said, "How you doing?" And he said, I fell off the roof today." I go, "You fell off the roof? Are you nuts? You're 70 years old. What are you doing on the roof?" He goes, "I've always done the roof." I go, "You're no longer doing the roof. You are now going to start a treat bucket." He goes, "A treat bucket?" I said, "Yes, you are now going to treat yourself to a handyman
There you go.
and to a roofer." And
That's right.
so,
You're going to
yeah,
supervise the guy that gets on the roof.
yeah.
No,
So,
that's great.
so I definitely, and I've been very lucky because my husband lived till he was 92. And I was lucky because he was he wasn't sick a long time. He had his issues that come with aging, but they weren't debilitating. So, and I saw he was very, very disciplined. He worked out every day. He ate the same, I hate to tell you, he ate the same things every day. Although some of it was processed foods, but
It's good stuff, right? I mean, that's okay.
yeah.
Well, now, Margaret, you and I, as I said, we've really kind of bonded over these conversations we've had on longevity, and you've done so much research, and I love it because you're always finding these really great articles and everything. What are the things that kind of excite you about what you're seeing in this whole space of longevity, financial or otherwise?
I think what I'm really finding is it's really important to know how to think about it, how you want to be, not just financially, but mentally, physically, and everything as you age, because the odds are you will live past 80.
Mm.
And if you're going to live past 80, how do you want to be? And so I don't think that you have to do all these fancy biometric stuff that and it seems to be more of a male thing. Hate to tell you.
Yeah, all the cold plunging and everything.
Yeah. And it's sort of funny because I talked to my acupuncturist who's Chinese. And he goes like, "I don't understand this ice stuff."
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's really great advice. And I think for women, because we do have a tendency to live at least maybe 4 years longer, there is a little bit of a daunting, oh my gosh, am I really prepared financially to live that long? And can I stay in my house, or can I keep doing the things, maybe that I love and I
Well,
want to do?
I think what the thing that financial planning really helps you do is decide it's what's really important for you and what is it going to take to have it. And so that you don't feel like you don't have everything because you have what you really want. And
Right.
it's a little bit like decluttering,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you're right. Well,
Yeah.
I hope that our listeners are getting from this conversation that I love is that, you know, people feel like, well, one, I have to be super wealthy to have a financial advisor. And I think you're saying, yes, you need a certain maybe amount of assets or whatever to manage, but everybody should, reach out to get some financial advice, at least initially. And
Well,
it doesn't just have to be about money, right? It's about your life.
candidly, the investing part is the easiest part. The
Okay.
harder part is real. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years to really figure out what's really important to you.
Right.
It's sort of funny. I just had a conversation with a client yesterday, and he had been in a job that he literally was not. He had moments of excitement, but in general, he grumbled about it for the last 20 years.
Right.
And so, because they were so dependent on government contracts, they really took a hit,
Mm.
and he was having to really look at. And so I said to him, I said, what are your real goals? He says, "I need to make a lot of money." I said, "When you need to make a lot of money, the odds are you won't make any."
Yeah, be careful what you're wishing for, right?
Well, in a way, in order to be successful, it's easier if you're passionate and you're really interested in something. So, this is why we spend time with our clients and saying, what's really, really important to you? And if it's important to you, you don't feel like you're giving up something to narrow your dreams and wishes a little bit. You can't really, most of us cannot have everything, no matter what we say. I can't be tall no matter what I do, right?
Right.
So I said, this is why we've had this proliferation of coaches and therapists and so forth, because there are people who can help you find yourself.
Right.
And it makes it, and so it does seem like it is a lot of money or wasteful. But what is worse is wasting time thinking about it and doing nothing.
Well, and I love the fact that you lead with life. You're not saying how much money do you have, how much do you want to invest here. That you're talking about what do you want your life to be, which is sometimes it's something that people, as we get older, we need to have that conversation. We need somebody who's asking the right questions, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Some of my most interesting financial planning experiences are people that make choices that I never thought they would make. Like I had a guy who was a CFO of a company. He was making a ton of money, but he wasn't happy.
Mm.
And it didn't matter what I did, what solutions I came up with, I could see there was no sparkle. So finally it hit me. I go, do you think you could use a sabbatical? And he perked up just like that. He says, what do I have to do to get that? And so as I said, it isn't always easy to figure out what you really want, but there are times when it's time to move on.
Right. Right. You've helped so many people over the decades. Is there any difference between advising women on their financial future and advising men? Any difference that you see?
You know what's really interesting? I hate to admit this, but it's actually easier to advise men than women.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that.
And it seems like the more educated the woman, the more difficult it is, because I think there's something for those of us who've had to struggle to get there. We hate to be wrong. So you do nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. And I think you pinpointed it too. We hate to be wrong. We don't want to make the wrong choice, so we just don't make a choice, right?
We don't want to, it's, you sort of got where you were because you were smart or you did
Right.
things right. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
And for men, I think they grow up knowing the difference between what's possible and what's probable, because
Right.
all of investing and making choices is really about knowing the difference between what's possible and what's probable. It's a little bit similar to being afraid of flying.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, it's possible that the plane's going to crash, but it's not probable.
Right.
So
Right.
life is very similar, but and so men seem to grasp it. I hate to be so stereotyping, but this is what I have found.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and I think it's great for the women who are listening out there to, go ahead and take that leap and talk to somebody like you who can help guide you on you don't want to make the wrong choice. Okay, so get somebody on your side who can help you
Well, one of
find
the
out.
things that I learned how to do, because there are some men who also are fraidy cats. So what
Right.
happened is you start them with low risk things. And so this is why if you start planning early, it's easier because we start them with low risk. It's like feeding them pablum at
Right.
first.
Right.
And then adding stuff to it. And then next thing you know, they're like millionaires and taking
Right.
risks. Yeah.
Right.
And so there are strategies for helping both men and women, do well. And I think the most important thing is if you work with the right advisor, it's not just about money.
Right.
But it is important that they understand. I think most advisors don't really care about your goals. I want to be honest.
Yeah. They're trying to sell products, right?
Not necessarily about products, but like it's a little bit like everything's a number.
Right.
So in my world, it's true. Like whatever your goals are, I do convert it to a formula, to numbers, because that's how we come up with probabilities.
Right.
But we also look at what you're willing to risk to have what you want. And some people are willing to take more risks to have what they want.
Do you think that being a woman makes you a better financial advisor because you're not just focused on those numbers? You're really probing into kind of the sensitive sides of life?
In general, I would say that's true. Yeah. In the end, what you really hope is that the people achieve their financial goals, and they what the most rewarding thing for me are the many retirees, because I've been in business 45 years. And so I have many clients who are in the 80s and 90s. And I think one of the most rewarding things is they'll call me out of the blue and tell me how grateful they are that they don't have to worry.
Ah, that's nice. That's got to be the best thing for
That
you.
is. I mean, that's really what you really want. You want an outcome and I got to tell you, I've had clients who've made U-turns in what they wanted. And you go, oh my God, how am I going to do this? But then you just lay out what their options are,
Right. Right. So, Margaret, again, as I said, you're so vibrant. You're thinking about the future. You're also such a great mentor. You started this women's conference that Raymond James now has held for how many years? Have you been putting on the
31.
women's?
I think it's 31.
Oh my goodness. And I really have to thank you because I was able to speak at the last conference you just did, but you had, I think, almost 900 women who are financial advisors, and you really wanted to put the spotlight on women as advisors because, as you said, there's not a lot of women who go into financial advisement.
Well, a lot of women don't realize the profession exists.
Mhm.
Everybody sort of thinks if you go into the financial world, you need to be a whiz at numbers, um, which is not true. I mean, you do have to know how to count,
Right.
but and I do know that I think in terms of numbers, So
Right.
but in general, it's really more of a different kind of consulting or advising. So the business has changed dramatically. It's not like the old days where you had to understand every stock. But there are specialists who you can outsource that to. I outsource all of that.
Well, and AI is going to start doing that for everybody, right?
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I mean, I think the thing about AI is that it can crunch numbers and aggregate data, but it doesn't have the human element
Yeah.
that is so crucial.
Yeah, I don't know if it's as good as one of the roles that we play isn't because we're so smart. One of the roles we play is that we're like your collie dog. We keep nudging you to stay on track because it's a little bit, why do you have a trainer? The trainer is just making sure you do the exercises right and that you do them right. Because when
Right.
the trainer shows up, you're going to spend that hour because you paid for it.
Yeah.
An advisor is the same way. It's not like we have as I said, investing is not complicated. What's hard is staying motivated to do the right thing.
Right.
Not be greedy, not be too scared, understanding possibilities versus probabilities. And so you sort of need someone to keep nudging you. Says, you're getting off track a little bit because you're getting too greedy. Like
Yeah.
the market is frothing now, and people hate to take. I had clients who during some of the bust ahead of time, we kept saying, you really should be trimming this, but they couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But after the first time, they start listening.
Right.
So in general, I think that while people worry about the cost of an advisor, the cost of not having one is greater.
Yeah. I mean, you can't be an expert at everything. And so
Right.
when you've got somebody like you on your side, that's just going to help give you that peace of mind, right? It's one less stress,
Right.
in my opinion, one
Right.
less stressor.
Right.
Life's already too full of stress. Well, Margaret, we've
Well,
got
not
just
only
a
that,
few.
but most people don't want to do it.
Oh yeah, like me.
Okay, then I'm going to find you somebody.
That's right. Okay, I love it. So we have just a few minutes left. Are there any secrets to living longer, living better, living healthier, living happier? What are Margaret's secrets to longevity?
I really wish I knew because I might be not having backaches. I
Well, you
definitely know I should have exercised more. I probably should have eaten
okay?
less. I probably should have slept more. I mean, I think it's sort of funny because, I grew up in the world where we prided ourselves if we didn't need a lot of sleep. I mean, I was one of those that
Yes,
didn't need a lot of sleep. Now, the advice from doctors said, set your alarm clock on when to go to bed.
right.
Yeah. You'll wake up in time, but
That's right.
may not go to bed on time, you know.
It's so true. I mean, all the things we thought we knew, and I kind of laugh too, being in this space of aging and gerontology. It used to be that the worst thing possible was to have a quote unquote hospital bed, right? Because that just said you're sick, you're vulnerable, you're frail. Nobody wanted that. And now look at all of us. So many people have adjustable beds, which are basically hospital beds without the rails
Really,
on the
they
side.
don't look like hospital beds.
Well, they don't have the rails on the side, so maybe that's
Right,
part of it.
right.
But we've got these great beds now that they'll lift your legs, they'll lift you up, and you can get in different positions.
What's
And
better than using 20 pillows?
yeah, that's so true. That is so true.
Yeah.
Any other little nuggets of living longer, better that you want to share with the audience?
I think it's just having consistent habits.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard to do. And sometimes we need help with that. And I
Well, what?
think people, a lot of people feel it's extravagant to pay for help. But
Right.
fortunately, I grew up in the world. In Mississippi, we all had help.
Mm,
And
yep.
it was, of course, very cheap back then. But
Right.
but you saw the value of it. In fact, one of my really good friends said the best advice I ever gave her was her husband objected to her hiring a cleaning woman. I go, how much do you pay that cleaning woman? And she said, $20 an hour. And I go, this was way back time. I go, how much do you make an hour? I said, wouldn't you rather work?
Yeah. Well, when you look at it that way, it makes a lot of sense, right? You aren't being extravagant at all.
Yeah.
But, one other question I have is that I think that sometimes younger generations are getting a little bit more in tune to longevity. They are looking at long-term care planning earlier. What would be your advice to families? Because so often the decisions that our parents or even grandparents make might impact us as younger, folks. So what is your advice when it comes to the family dynamic and finances?
Well, I think like in my particular case, the one thing I don't really ever want to be is burden my kids with being caretakers. I mean, I want them to be concerned, but this shouldn't be consuming their everyday. And we see this a lot.
Right.
And so I think it's very important to find ways to how you're going to finance that possibility, because it is a very strong possibility. I mean, it could happen from an accident. It may be just due to bad luck,
Yeah.
because you hear
Yeah.
about people in accidents. And you cannot depend on services or government to help finance this. Is because it's not reliable,
True.
you know.
Yeah, it's
And and
very
and
true.
the, and truth, with the aging population, it's going to be even more important that you sort of figure this out. Now, the good news is there's a whole range of choices today that we didn't have. Remember, gosh, maybe 15 years ago, no one knew the word assisted living. It was all nursing homes. And nursing home was like going to the end of the world. It was
Right.
not a happy idea.
No, nobody of a certain age wants to go into a nursing home.
So
You
what
know?
happened is, I think, look, growing up, living in Miami, we have seen the proliferation of different types of so most people call it senior living. And
Right.
so there may be things for just people over 55. And
Right.
everybody that lives there are between 55 and 75. And then they move. And so you have different financing models. Because in the older model and in California, which is way behind in terms of options, I was shocked when we try to help clients in California, they don't really have the many financial options. So I think it's harder to plan for aging in California, believe it or not, than it is in Florida.
Yeah, well, Florida has so many services that have supported the older population. Well, Margaret,
Well,
yeah,
partly they've experimented with a lot of different financial models. There's no financial support from the government, but the thing is, there are their whole areas,
options.
yeah. And so you can do. The challenge is none of it's cheap,
Right. And
but you
that's
don't have to mortgage your life. And so it used to be that you had to make a big down payment, maybe $500,000 or more. And
right.
you might not get it back. And guess what? A lot of these places would go bankrupt and then you were stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to take that risk anymore in Florida.
No. And that's where a good advisor like you can really come in handy. Margaret, it's been wonderful talking to you. And I want to thank you so much for making time to be on the podcast. This has just been really terrific. And I really appreciate your friendship and all of your insights.
Thank you. And this was fun. I enjoyed it too.
Thank you for joining us on this episode. A reminder, you can find more information in my book, Me Time Monday, The Weekly Wellness Plan to Find Balance and Joy for a Busy Life, or visit MeTimeMonday.com or CaregivingClub.com. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Caregiving Club On Air. Please hit the subscribe button to listen to us on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, SiriusXM, iHeartRadio, Pandora, as well as other listening channels. Check out all the resources and article links on our episode guide page at caregivingclub.com. Just hit the podcast tab at the top and email us with comments and questions at podcast@caregivingclub.com. Thank you again for listening, and take care and stay well.